Right now, somewhere over the battlefields of Eastern Europe, a drone is flying through jammed airspace.
Yeah.
Its radio connection to a human pilot who is sitting in a bunker miles away is completely dead. The screen has just gone to static.
Totally blank.
Right, completely blank.
All right.
But the drone isn't falling out of the sky. It isn't returning to base. Instead, its onboard computer is scanning the ruined landscape below, identifying heat signatures, tracking movement, and making a cold mathematical choice about who lives and who dies entirely on its own.
It really sounds like a scene from a dystopian thriller, right? Or, something out of science fiction.
It really does.
But it is happening today.
It is happening today, and the technology is advancing far, far faster than our ability to comprehend its implications. We are looking at systems that operate in a sort of shadowland of military tech, bringing with them some massive, very dangerous blind spots. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are stepping into those shadows. We're launching an investigation into the hidden algorithms that are quietly taking over life and death decisions on the modern battlefield.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic.
It is. We want to understand the deeply unsettling erosion of human accountability that comes when you let a machine pull the trigger. And we're basing this investigation on a meticulously researched document by Carlos G. Chaniol from the Casla Institute's Center for Cybersecurity Studies.
Right, and he takes a really hard investigative look at the concept of the AI soldier and exposes the hidden risks of removing humanity from warfare.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly understand the danger of these shadowy algorithms, we first have to understand the incredibly strong, almost irresistible temptation for military leaders to use this tech right now.
And we have to acknowledge that the temptation isn't born out of malice. I mean, the commanders advocating for these autonomous systems aren't cartoon villains trying to build some evil robot army.
Right, they're dealing with reality.
Exactly. They are looking at the brutal, bleeding reality of combat. The argument for the machine is deceptively simple and highly practical. I mean, robots do not feel fear.
Nah.
They don't suffer from sleep deprivation. They don't get combat fatigue. And they don't panic when they are ambushed.
I hear that. I mean, if you need to send someone into a chemically contaminated zone to check for nerve gas, or, you need someone to walk up to an improvised explosive device and defuse it, sending a machine objectively saves human lives.
Absolutely.
It's just basic hazard reduction.
Precisely. In those scenarios, the machine is a shield. But the technology is no longer just a remote-controlled shield. And we don't have to look to the future to see this shift. We just have to look at the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
Which has essentially become a live, high-stakes testing ground for autonomous warfare.
Exactly. The operational pressure there is just immense.
You mentioned the jammed airspace earlier. I want to dig into that because I think people hear the word drone and they picture a guy with a joystick and a video feed. But what does a jammed electronic warfare environment actually look like for the machine?
So electronic warfare, or EW, is basically invisible combat. Imagine you are flying a drone via remote control, and suddenly the enemy blasts the area with massive amounts of radio frequency noise.
Like jamming the signal.
Right. It's like trying to have a whispered conversation in the front row of a heavy metal concert.
Wow. Okay, that paints a picture.
Yeah, the signal is just drowned out entirely. The link between the human operator and the drone is severed. Now, historically, a drone in that situation would just drop out of the sky or automatically fly back to where it launched.
Because it doesn't know what to do without instructions.
Exactly. But now, because of the massive tactical pressure, militaries are programming the drone's AI to finish the mission autonomously when that radio link dies.
Meaning the machine takes over the entire kill chain. And just so we are totally clear on the terminology for everyone listening, the kill chain is the military process of identifying a target, tracking it, deciding to engage, and then assessing the strike. Right.
That is correct. Traditionally, a human makes the decision at every critical link in that chain.
Every step of the way.
Right. But in an intense EW environment, the AI is increasingly being tasked with executing that entire chain on its own.
Let me push back on the enthusiasm for this, though, because deploying highly autonomous AI in a chaotic war zone feels like unleashing a fleet of experimental self-driving cars in a high-speed demolition derby.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, you have civilians, you have unpredictable weather, you have debris, and you have the literal fog of war. If we're already relying on these algorithms to fly through static and do reconnaissance, how thin is the line before we just let the algorithm pull the trigger entirely on its own, even when it isn't jammed?
What's fascinating here is that the line isn't just thin. In some operational theaters, it is blurring to the point of being totally invisible.
Really? Totally invisible.
Yes, because there is an immense tactical incentive to let the machine take the shot. Think about it. An algorithm can process threat data from radar, calculate wind speed and ballistics, and execute a strike in a fraction of a second.
Vastly faster than human reflexes.
Vastly faster. But the moment we allow that, we cross a monumental ethical threshold. We transition from using the machine as a tool to deploying the machine as a moral agent.
And that pivot from a camera that helps you see to a piece of code that decides who dies takes us right into the darkest part of this investigation.
The black box.
Exactly. We need to look at the black box of how these decisions are managed. Because obviously defense contractors don't exactly advertise this as killer robots making their own rules. They have a whole, sanitized language designed to make this sound perfectly safe and under control.
They absolutely do. The defense sector relies heavily on jargon that projects an illusion of control. You'll constantly hear phrases in the briefing rooms like human on the loop or meaningful human control.
Human on the loop. It does sound incredibly comforting.
It does. It paints a picture of a responsible, highly trained officer sitting at a desk, carefully reviewing every single action the AI suggests before granting permission to fire.
Let me stop you there, though. Because if a human has to literally hit the approve button on a screen before the missile fires, isn't that the literal definition of human control? How is that an illusion?
Because of the mechanics of human psychology combined with the sheer speed of the machine, it's a phenomenon called automation bias.
Automation bias?
Right. Think about the chaos of actual combat. Imagine an autonomous drone swarm moving at hundreds of miles an hour, analyzing thousands of data points a second. A human operator sitting thousands of miles away gets an alert on a screen flashing red saying, "Target identified. Recommend strike."
Okay.
That human might have less than 2 seconds to decide.
2 seconds to verify a target they didn't even find themselves?
Exactly. They don't have the time, the context, or the situational awareness to verify why the algorithm flagged that specific target. So what does the human brain do?
It just trusts the computer?
It defaults to trusting the machine because the machine is usually right. The human isn't exercising meaningful control at all. They are just a biological bottleneck.
A biological bottleneck. Wow.
Yeah, they just become a rubber stamp. And when the human is reduced to just hitting agree on a screen they barely comprehend, true oversight is completely gone.
Which brings up the core technological mystery here, the AI itself. We keep calling it a black box, but I want to make sure we understand why it's a black box. If an engineer built the software, why can't they just look at the code and see exactly why the drone decided to strike?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer is because the AI systems driving these drones aren't built on traditional old-school computer code.
Okay, what do you mean by traditional code?
Traditional software is written in clear if-then rules. If X happens, do Y. You can read it like a book. But modern military AI uses deep neural networks.
Right, neural networks.
And neural networks are not explicitly programmed. They are trained. You feed them millions of images of tanks, and the network adjusts millions of internal mathematical weights until it learns to recognize a tank on its own.
So the programmer doesn't actually write the rule for what a tank looks like.
Right. It's like hiring a brilliant chef who refuses to write down their recipes.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Yeah. So you know the food tastes good 99% of the time. But if someone suddenly gets severe food poisoning, you can't go into the kitchen, open a recipe book, and figure out which ingredient caused it.
Because there is no recipe book.
Exactly. The chef just knows how to cook it. And a neural network just knows how to find the target based on its massive web of mathematical weights. Even the engineer who built it cannot look inside the network and tell you exactly why it decided a shadow on the ground was an enemy combatant instead of a civilian gathering firewood.
Okay, that makes it incredibly real. Let's ground this for you listening right now. Think about how often your smartphone algorithm fails at basic tasks. Think about how often Face ID misidentifies a person in your photo album, or, how often a fraud algorithm falsely flags your credit card at the grocery store.
It happens all the time.
Now take that everyday algorithmic failure, scale it up to the speed of modern combat, and arm it with a Hellfire missile.
And that leads to the ultimate investigative dead end, which is the chain of accountability.
Right.
Let's play out a deeply tragic but highly probable scenario. An autonomous drone is deployed over a city. It's supposed to hit an enemy convoy. But the neural network misinterprets a sensor reading, gets confused by the geometry of a building, and it strikes a civilian vehicle instead. Who goes to jail?
Who is to blame?
That is the exact question Shaniel wrestles with in his research, and the answer is terrifyingly unclear. Is it the commander who ordered the drone deployment?
Well, they'll defend themselves by saying they relied on the system's officially certified accuracy rate.
Exactly. Is it the massive private defense contractor who built the physical machine?
They'll point fingers at the software subcontractor.
Right. So is it software engineer back in Silicon Valley who trained the data model?
They'll argue they couldn't possibly predict the specific weather and lighting conditions on that battlefield.
Exactly. Or is it that exhausted operator at the screen who had 0.5 seconds to intervene and couldn't process the data fast enough?
It's like looking into a web of corporate shell companies. But instead of hiding stolen money, they are hiding the moral responsibility for taking a human life.
It's entirely diffuse.
But wait, if everyone is just a little bit responsible for the strike, doesn't that mean no one is actually responsible at all?
Precisely. And in the laws of armed conflict, accountability is the bedrock of everything. When a human soldier commits a war crime, there is a court-martial. There is a rigid chain of command. There is the capacity for guilt.
Right, humans feel guilt.
But a neural network cannot feel guilt. You cannot put a mathematical weight on trial. By diffusing the responsibility so thinly across an entire supply chain of engineers, contractors, and operators, the accountability just evaporates into the ether.
Wait, if no one is accountable for the individual strikes on the battlefield, how does a country hold its leadership accountable for the war itself? Here's where it gets really interesting, because the consequences of this black box don't just stay in the trenches.
No, they don't.
When you take the human risk out of the kill chain and you completely obscure the accountability, you fundamentally alter how entire nations, how entire democracies behave on the global stage.
Yes, and this is perhaps Shaniel's most chilling warning in the entire paper. He identifies this as the moral hazard of AI soldiers.
Moral hazard. Let's dig into that.
To understand this, we have to look at history. Historically, the single greatest political break on warfare has been the gruesome, visible cost it inflicts on the society that wages it.
The reality of returning coffins.
Exactly. Think about the Vietnam War. The draft forced average citizens to bear the ultimate physical risk of their government's foreign policy.
And that human cost resulted in massive, visceral protests.
It forced the public, the media, and the politicians to constantly, agonizingly weigh whether the conflict was truly worth the blood being spilled. That human risk creates a natural, democratic friction against endless warfare.
So if you replace the drafted soldier with an autonomous drone, that democratic friction just disappears.
It evaporates. If an AI absorbs the physical cost of combat, the political and ethical brakes on warfare are dangerously weakened. If a prime minister or a president can launch a sustained military campaign without risking the lives of their own citizens, the threshold for using lethal force drops dramatically.
It makes war feel like a cheap administrative task.
It makes military coercion incredibly cheap. You don't have to face angry parents at town halls. You don't have to face anti-war protests driven by mounting casualties.
The horror of war becomes a purely financial calculation on a sanitized spreadsheet. Just, we lost 50 drones today, put in a purchase order to the contractor for 50 more.
Exactly. This raises an important question. What happens to our democratic institutions when the physical and moral cost of war is entirely outsourced to machines? If war becomes painless for the society ordering it, do we become a society that is simply always at war?
It completely lowers the barrier to entry for violence. The idea of sitting in a sanitized, air-conditioned situation room halfway across the world, pushing a button and letting opaque algorithms do the dirty work, it's horrifying.
It is.
But let me play devil's advocate for a moment. I know anyone listening to this is probably thinking about the geopolitical reality. We don't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
Why would any country, especially a democracy, just stop developing this tech if their adversaries are pushing the pedal to the metal?
You're highlighting the great geopolitical trap. It's the classic security dilemma. The pressure of global competition is intense. Other massive global powers, specifically Russia and China, along with multi-billion-dollar global defense contractors, are absolutely not pausing their AI development out of ethical concerns.
They're going all in.
They are investing heavily in autonomous swarms, AI-driven targeting, and unmanned ground vehicles. The arms race is not some future prediction we are trying to prevent. It is fully underway right now.
Right. So if the other guy is building a hyper-fast, fully autonomous drone that doesn't wait for human permission, and we insist on building a slow, human-in-the-loop drone that hesitates, we lose. Isn't asking for restraint in an AI arms race like asking a runner to wear lead boots in an Olympic sprint?
Hmm.
How do democracies innovate and protect themselves without completely surrendering their core
It's
principles?
a brutal calculation, I grant you that. But Shanjul points out a crucial counterargument. Competition cannot be an excuse for total thoughtlessness. Yes, democracies must defend themselves, but they face a critical test of judgment here. The burden of proof shouldn't be on the skeptics to prove why killer robots are bad.
The burden of proof must fall squarely on the advocates of autonomous weapons.
Yes, they have to explain why a democracy, a system inherently built on the rule of law and human rights, should ever delegate lethal judgment to a black box system whose speed vastly outpaces human oversight.
So what does that restraint actually look like in practice? How do you build a military AI that isn't a massive moral hazard?
Shanya lays out a clear, non-negotiable mandate. Robotics must serve human purposes, not replace human judgment. Any system deployed by a democracy must be fundamentally traceable and interruptible.
Meaning you can't use the brilliant chef who won't write down the recipe.
Exactly. You need to be able to look at the data logs after a strike and understand the exact auditable mechanism of why a machine took a specific action.
So no black boxes.
No black boxes. And crucially, you need a hardwired mechanism to pull the plug instantly. If you build a weapon system so fast and so autonomous that it cannot be audited or interrupted by its human commanders, you haven't built a weapon. You built a massive liability.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, war is not just about raw destructive capability. A biological virus has raw destructive capability.
Right.
War, as governed by international law, requires judgment. It requires the uniquely human ability to look at a target, recognize a soldier trying to surrender, notice a child in the window of a building, and exercise restraint.
Because restraint is what separates a soldier from a slaughterhouse.
Exactly. Algorithms, fundamentally, are just math,
Yeah.
and math cannot compute mercy.
So what does this all mean? We've traced this from the initial, very understandable tactical allure of keeping human soldiers safe from harm.
Yeah.
We've gone down into the dark web of diffuse accountability where no one is responsible for a strike. And we've scaled up to the macro-level threat of a society that wages endless, cheap warfare because the political brakes have been removed.
It's a grim picture.
It is. What we're really talking about here isn't just a software patch for the military. Giving machines the authority to take human lives is not merely a technical upgrade. It is a profound moral shift.
It is a seismic shift.
Right.
And I think Carlos G. Shanyul's concluding thought captures the gravity of that shift perfectly. He argues that handing the agonizing burdens of moral judgment and lethal accountability over to machines wouldn't be a triumph of technological innovation. It would be a catastrophic failure of nerve.
A failure of nerve. Wow. Because it means we are too afraid to bear the moral weight of the violence we are unleashing upon the world, so we hand the responsibility off to a piece of opaque code so we don't have to look at it.
Precisely. War is ultimately a reflection of the society that wages it. If we choose to sacrifice our humanity and our accountability purely for the sake of operational efficiency and speed, we are fundamentally altering our own collective moral fabric. We diminish ourselves in the process.
It really makes you realize the stake you have in this, even if you never put on a uniform or step onto a battlefield. Which leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling thought to investigate as we wrap up.
Let's hear.
We've spent this entire deep dive looking at foreign battlefields. We've looked at the jammed airspace in Ukraine, and we've talked about geopolitical adversaries like Russia and China. But investigative history tells us that technology almost never stays purely deployed overseas.
Very true.
Defense contractors are massive businesses. They are always looking for new markets and new applications. Think about the implications. If these companies successfully build, test, and normalize autonomous lethal algorithms for foreign wars, what happens when those exact same black box systems are inevitably adapted for domestic use?
It's a terrifying thought.
What happens when the autonomous surveillance drones designed to patrol a hostile ruined city abroad are quietly sold to local police forces for riot control or deployed for border security right here at home? Will the moral hazard of cheap automated coercion come to our own streets?
Given the historical pipeline of military hardware to domestic law enforcement, it's not just a possibility. It's a highly probable future we need to prepare for.
Imagine looking up into the sky over your own city and seeing that silent, mechanical march. No shouting, no human heartbeat stepping into the fray, just the eerie hum of a machine processing mathematical weights, deciding your fate. The AI soldier isn't just a threat to the traditional rules of war, it might just be a threat to us all.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the algorithms, stay vigilant, and we'll catch you next time.